Hello and welcome back to my channel, Checks Captures Threats. In today's video, in episode 75 of the chess guide, we'll be going over how to stop a passed pawn. So this is our last little bit on the whole passed pawn part. So we went over how to create them, how to use them. Now it's going to see how to stop them. So just got a few tips here, and we're going to show you now how we're able to stop them. So the first one, which is really the key and one you should always follow, is block the pawn that's going to be obviously the passed pawn here. Just block it. Now, when we say we block it, now what pieces do we use? Any piece will be obviously other than a pawn, because otherwise it would be classified as a passed pawn. Any other piece can be used to block it. So in this scenario, we can use a rook here, and here it's going to be a very simple draw, as we're able to support this with 2 on 2, and this pawn will not push. And by any means, if they were to do, add on to this game, it would be very simple stuff like this, where there's just going to be never-ending checks, and we'll just keep doing this, and it gets to a point where there is no way black can push this pawn. So we have that. Now, how else can we do this? Well, we can also block with probably the best piece, which is the king. King is very good at blocking here, as this rook will obviously be able to do very many different things. So obviously they have to get the king in, because they can't push just yet, which is why we can do something like this. It's a lot easier to, get this to move away, and we can just easily be able to attack this pawn without much happening. So again, if they were to play something like this, we can just take, and this is a draw. So very simple there on how we're able to very easily, and obviously this is the core tip here, always block the passed pawn with a piece. Now when I say piece, obviously I'm relating to every piece other than a pawn. So our second tip was also here would be using the king early in this. Now what I mean by that is getting the king to straight away attack this. So putting it in front is obviously a very good idea here, as we said here, like this. But also you can just use it as an attacking piece like this, and it's very simple to just do something like this, like we had before, and attack the pawns. The king is a very, very good attacker when it comes to attacking pawns, because obviously they can move the same amount. So it's not like, the rook, where the rook can go, 8 squares every time, whereas the pawn can only go 1 square and the king can only go 1 square. So now another here is obviously still blocking with pieces, and I just want to show you here how we can block with any other piece. Now the knight, obviously here this is the passed pawn, obviously the only pawn here. What we can do here is actually block it with our knight. So if they were to try and come in here like this, now if they were to try and attack that, we can obviously trade off, and this is actually a draw, because his king and his pawn are on the same rank. It can't happen. This king has to be in front of this pawn, and it's going to be something like this. And again, as we've gone over king and pawn endgames, this is a draw. Now if they want to try and trade off those knights and try and get the king in, then it would actually be quite, again, this knight will struggle to get in, and when you have moves like this, then, there is nothing that black can do here. And we can just keep moving our pieces. It still can't push because we can recapture, and, checks, we still can block here. So the knights are a good blocking piece, the bishops are a good blocking piece, especially the rook. I would say don't block a passed pawn with a queen, as, if you have a king and a queen, if your king's not in play, then that's already just losing, obviously, on a spot. You need to use all your pieces to try and get that, especially in an endgame like this. Now, last but not least, we are also going to show you how, if we can't defend, there's 2 pieces here with this pawn, and if we can't just, defend it, we can always get rid of one of their supporters here. So what we can do is actually offer a trade, give a check, king has to move, and we can very easily trade like this. Now what this means here is obviously you're trying to trade material to just get less attackers and defenders. So the less there is on the board, the easier it is for the defending side to not have this, this king and pawn able to attack us. So, and again, in this position, we can again say about how we can use the king to block, and how we'll have positions like this again, where it's going to be a draw, because obviously this is now going to go, and it's going to be a draw. So what would I say is the best tip out of the three I've given you here? I would say put a piece in front of the passed pawn. It's definitely top priority. Though, it's obviously not always the best, and there can lead to scenarios where your king might not be in play and their king can attack you and you are forced to maybe sacrifice and lose. Now, instead, another tip I would say that I use here is definitely try and trade the pieces off. If you can see how their pawn is like this, and you see how they've moved their king in front, and they're trying to do that, but if it's always behind, make sure if it's something like this, you try and trade. If we go back to one of the previous examples here, where we was able to get all of this in now, you can see how all it takes is just a rook trade, for example, and it will end up in king and pawns. And if you can make sure this king is with this pawn and this king is behind it, you're going to be able to get a very easy draw. Now, this is not what I'm saying here. When they have a passed pawn, it's incredibly difficult for you to win against this. The only way I could possibly see winning in a scenario like this is if you were to take this pawn, they don't capture, and they miraculously lose their rook, which is just not proper play. And what you've got to know is if they have a pawn up, you're looking for a draw as white. Never try and look for anything more, and you're like, oh, well, I can't capture this because it's just going to, I can't capture this pawn because it's going to lead to a draw. Exactly, you have to do that. If you try and, not take, and you just keep it like this, you try and just go back, firstly, there's no progress anyway. It's going to be a draw because there's literally nothing that these two can do now. And if you were to try and, maybe make mistakes and try and do this and allow a push, for example, then, you're now just losing, really. And you've got to, you can't be playing stuff like this, as you will be losing now. You are actually, the evaluation bar puts you at a loss. So you've got to make sure the core things about this is put a piece in front of the passed pawn, but always look to make sure you're getting a draw and you're not looking for more. So, just to recap over all of our examples here, blocking with pieces, obviously, and making sure we have enough supporters there. Same thing goes with this example, having get a piece in front. Again, we can also actually put our king in front in this scenario as well. As you can see here, king, if the pawn's in front of the king, it's most likely a draw anyway. And last but not least, we also went over how we can trade off pieces. And in a scenario like this, it's always going to draw when you have something like this. This king has to be, if this pawn was back here, this actually might be a different scenario. But it's not, and especially when a passed pawn, most of the time will be pushed quite high up. So that's going to be it for today's video. That was how to stop a passed pawn. So that is it for our little 3 episodes of how to go over that. We'll be going over something else now in the coming episodes. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. So thank you and bye bye.